Hey, I'm Scott Allen Miller. Today on Sam IT, we're going to tackle the question of why we need to be worried about getting SLAs, or service level agreements. This is one of those ones that I say quite often, and people often respond thinking, I must be crazy. Clearly, a service level agreement guarantees that a vendor or supplier is going to meet a certain service level for us. So we want it. People will pay a lot of extra money to get an SLA over getting a normal service that doesn't have a service level agreement tied to it. It's one of the most obvious things that you need a service level agreement to protect yourself. Otherwise, you're left with best effort and, the company can do anything they want. This is fundamentally not true. The idea, the logic behind an SLA, yes, that's it. But first, let's tackle best effort. Best effort literally means the best they can do. It doesn't matter what your service level is. The best effort that a vendor can do for you is the best. It doesn't get better. Paying for a higher service level agreement doesn't work if best effort is what they were already doing. It only works if they weren't doing best effort. Now, of course, the implication is that best effort doesn't mean best effort. It means intentionally bad effort. Well, that's possible, but that's often not the case. Lots of vendors are actually giving their best effort anyway. No one can give a true service, and service levels are just limits, right? People often assume that a service level, say you have a service level on a WAN connection that says you will never be down for more than 24 hours. Of course, in no way whatsoever can a service level agreement guarantee that you won't be down more than 24 hours. It doesn't mean that at all. It can't. Technology cannot be guaranteed in those ways. So that's fundamentally illogical to think of it in that context. What an SLA means is that if they go over the terms that are guaranteed by the service level, that the vendor or supplier will have some penalty that they'll have to pay. Often, for example, you may not have to pay for that service once it goes past 24 hours. What's bad here is that if they were under best effort, you wouldn't have to pay for a service you weren't getting anyway. What did that service level get you? Nothing. For the average service level agreement, it doesn't protect the customer, it protects the vendor. A service level agreement typically guarantees the maximum penalty that customers can attempt to extract from their vendors given certain levels of failure to meet their services. Think about that. It protects the vendors from their customers. A normal service level agreement that says they are maximum liable for the cost of their service means that they get to look at every customer who has an outage and say, are they worth servicing now that we've had an outage? In many cases, a vendor will look at you and say, oh, they're very expensive to support. We only make so much money from them. It's better to simply enact the SLA and take whatever penalty there is instead of completing the work for the customer. The SLA guarantees that they can make a cost evaluation based on a limit of how much damage you can do to them. Often, simply you no longer have to pay for the service. In some cases, you may be trapped with the service. This is the worst one. In many cases, you'll find SLAs that guarantee that even if you're out, as long as the company, the vendor, provides whatever is the term of the SLA, such as not charging you for the service or maybe charging you half price for the service, that you're not allowed to break the contract because they're not in breach of contract. They have a service level that guarantees what they have to pay should they decide not to provide service, which means they're not in breach. They simply have to pay. So if they're paying that, often, which does not include them giving you money, just not extracting money from you or as much, you are still locked into the contract. You may be in a position where you're unable to go after an alternative vendor because your SLA guarantees that they're able to lock you in. Now, of course, a really well-written SLA that your attorneys have scoured over to no end may be to your benefit. These do exist. It's not that SLAs must in all circumstances be to the benefit of the vendor, but almost always they are. Vendors write the SLAs. Vendors do this for the purpose of protecting themselves, and just like in-store warranties when you go to buy a new television, they understand that these are things that they can convince customers to pay extra for while getting even less cost to support them because they're protecting themselves. It is simply a situation where good marketing has created an ability to really, really take advantage of existing customers. Those same customers who would have paid less to get better, best effort service can be tricked into spending maybe twice as much, and now the vendor doesn't have to deliver as much. This is where SLAs tend to take us. Just like insurance, where yeah, you have insurance for your house, but oh, we don't cover those things. SLAs often play in the same kind of way. You pay a premium, and when it comes time to actually enact the SLA is when you find out what it really means in your situation, often to your deficit. So I hope that this has been helpful. I say that a lot. SLAs are a tough one because we as IT tend not to look at these things from a legal perspective. We simply hear SLA and think that must be good, but that's not how it works. SLAs, by their nature, are an adversarial document. They exist to make your suppliers your enemies, and they make you their enemy at the time they start writing the SLA. The SLA itself is written in an adversarial mode. That's something we just have to understand. And so anytime you're working with an SLA, it means you don't trust each other, and that SLA is part of that distrust. You must approach it with the right mindset. You must look at it and see how it protects the vendor from you instead of just assuming it must protect you from the vendor. That's not how the world works. Vendors have zero interest in spending money on their attorneys to protect you. They would never do that. They are spending money on their attorneys to protect them, no matter how much it looks like an SLA must be somehow written for you. It is also a problem that SLAs are popular in organizations with lots of political problems, where it's not about how many services you can deliver and how much value you can bring to the company, but how much finger pointing you can have. And to some degree, SLAs may work out for you if you're in an extremely unhealthy organization where all they care about is placing blame and not making money. That's a horrific statement, but the average company actually may have that problem. This is not an uncommon thing at all. If you think about the owner and they're out and they're losing money, do they really want to make money, or do they want to blame someone and be angry? If you really think about it, the average owner cares more about blame and anger than they do about making money. If they didn't, they probably would have done things to protect making money more. Instead, they tend to get things like SLAs, which allow the IT department, for example, or the legal department to show an SLA and say, look, it's not our fault. They guaranteed and they didn't meet it. And the vendor gets to say, look, we have an SLA that says this is our maximum penalty. So here you go, not our problem. And we're not under, you can't expand how much damage you can do to us. You can't sue us for an outage. You can't sue us for bad faith. You can't sue us for all these things, for loss of revenue, because you signed a contract saying this is the maximum we would ever consider from an outage or from a failure to deliver. And so everybody gets to point fingers and blame someone else and act like it isn't their problem. That's what makes SLAs popular with customers. So if you have a situation where SLAs seem like they would be good for you, you may want to step back and evaluate, is it because your company is unhealthy and they're not looking to do the best thing for the business, meaning the bottom line financially, but they're actually looking to CYA because internally people don't trust each other and care more about blaming each other than they do about doing the right thing for the health of the organization. So SLAs create problems from all different angles. And in reality, I've almost never seen one work out in a good way for anybody except the vendors. If you're a vendor, absolutely, make an SLA. It's one of the best tools you can do to up your revenue while protecting yourself. Thanks for joining me. Remember to like and subscribe. Put your comments below. How have you been burned by your vendors' SLAs? And remember, if you want to, you can support us on Patreon.